The haunting whistle of a freight train cut through the evening air as Olivia Burke huddled in the corner of her brother's tumble-down cabin, clutching a crumpled letter that had arrived that morning. Jerome Junction, Arizona Territory, 1883. A place that had once promised a fresh start for her family after their parents' passing 3 years ago, but had instead become a prison of broken promises and mounting despair. "It's done, Olivia. I've settled it." Vernon Burke's voice was hollow as he stepped through the door, his once handsome face haggard from too many nights of cards and whiskey. At 28, he was 10 years her senior, but the last year had aged him beyond his years. Olivia looked up, her honey-brown hair falling loose from its pins. "What's done, Vernon?" "The debt." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Flannery's been paid." Relief washed over her. Thomas Flannery, the saloon owner who held Vernon's considerable gambling debts, had been threatening them for weeks. "How? You said there was no way." "I made a deal." Vernon poured himself a measure of whiskey, his hands trembling. "You'll be leaving tomorrow." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Leaving? I don't understand." "I sold your contract, 2 years of service to clear my debts." Olivia's world collapsed around her. "You sold me." The words felt foreign on her tongue, impossible. "Like property?" "Not like that," Vernon insisted, though his eyes told a different story. "As a housekeeper, a cook, nothing improper." "To whom?" she demanded, rising to her feet, the letter forgotten. "Flannery arranged it. Some rancher north of town needs household help." Vernon downed the whiskey in one gulp. "It's done, Liv. Papers are signed." The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Her own brother, the last of her family, trading her away to save his own skin. At 18, Olivia had spent the past 3 years cooking, cleaning, and keeping their humble home while Vernon drank away what little they earned from her seamstress work and his irregular carpentry jobs. "How could you?" Tears burned her eyes. "After everything, after I gave up school, after I stayed when the Millers offered me work in Prescott." "I had no choice," Vernon shouted, slamming down his glass. "Flannery was going to take the cabin, take everything. At least this way you'll have a roof over your head, food on your plate." "And what about my choice?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Did you consider that for even a moment?" Vernon looked away, shame briefly crossing his face before hardening into defensiveness. "We all make sacrifices, Liv." Olivia packed that night with shaking hands, folding her modest dresses and few keepsakes into the trunk that had belonged to their mother. Sleep never came, her mind racing with terrifying visions of what awaited her. By dawn, she was sitting on her trunk in the yard, waiting, refusing to spend another moment under the same roof as the brother who had betrayed her. The morning sun had barely cleared the distant mountains when dust rose on the horizon. A wagon approached, driven by a man Olivia didn't recognize. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore a flat-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, a leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and worn denim trousers tucked into scuffed boots. As he drew closer, she could see his weathered face, not old, perhaps early 30s, but marked by sun and wind, with a strong jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes as blue as the Arizona sky. "Miss Burke?" His voice was deep but gentle, with a hint of an accent she couldn't place. Not local, certainly. "Yes." She stood, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. "Vincent Fletcher." He touched the brim of his hat. "I've come to take you to the Silvercrest Ranch." Vernon emerged from the cabin, looking worse than he had the night before. "This is her," he said unnecessarily. Vincent's eyes never left Olivia as he nodded. "I know what your brother told you. I'd like to hear your understanding of the arrangement." The question caught her off guard. I'm to work as your housekeeper." "For 2 years, to settle my brother's debts." Vincent Fletcher's expression darkened as he looked at Vernon. "Not exactly, Miss Burke." He stepped down from the wagon and approached her, stopping at a respectful distance. "Your brother owes Flannery money. I paid that debt in full." "Then I'm to work for you to repay that amount," Olivia concluded, trying to keep her voice steady. "No," Vincent shook his head. "The debt is settled. What happens next is entirely your choice." Vernon stepped forward. "Now wait a minute." "Be quiet," Vincent said, his tone leaving no room for argument. To Olivia, he continued more gently. "Miss Burke, I bought the contract your brother signed because no one should be traded away like cattle. I've no intention of enforcing it. You can come work at my ranch as a housekeeper, with fair wages and proper accommodations. Or I can give you enough money to take the train to wherever you'd like to go. Or you can stay here, if that's your wish." He cast a cold glance at Vernon. "Though I wouldn't recommend it." Olivia stared at him, unable to comprehend the sudden reversal of her fortune. Why would you do this for a stranger? A shadow crossed Vincent's face. "Let's just say I've seen what happens when people are denied their freedom." He looked directly at Vernon. "And I've little patience for men who'd sell their own kin." Vernon's face flushed with anger and shame. "The deal's done, Fletcher. You can't just, 'I can and I have.'" Vincent's hand moved subtly toward the gun at his hip. "Unless you'd like to make a case of it?" Vernon backed down immediately. "Take her then. Good riddance." The words stung. Even though Olivia had already decided she wanted nothing more to do with her brother, she turned to Vincent. "I'll come to your ranch, Mr. Fletcher, at least until I decide what I want to do next." Vincent nodded. "Fair enough." He lifted her trunk effortlessly into the wagon, then offered his hand to help her up to the seat. His calloused palm was warm against hers, the grip strong yet gentle. As they pulled away, Olivia didn't look back at the cabin or her brother. Instead, she fixed her gaze on the road ahead, the endless sky, and the mountains rising purple in the distance. For the first time in years, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. "Miss Burke," Vincent said after they'd traveled in silence for a time, "I want you to understand something. You'll have a private room at the ranch house. You'll take your meals with me and my foreman, Hector Diaz, and his wife Rosa, who helps with the cooking. You'll be paid a fair wage, and your duties will be reasonable." He glanced at her. "And you can leave any time you wish." "Why did you really pay my brother's debt, Mr. Fletcher?" Olivia asked, studying his profile. Vincent was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, 10 years ago, I was in a position not unlike yours. Someone showed me kindness when I needed it most." He adjusted the reins in his gloved hands. "I'm just returning the favor." Something in his tone told Olivia there was more to the story, but she didn't press. She had her own secrets, her own pains. She understood the need for privacy. The journey to Silvercrest Ranch took nearly 3 hours, winding through rocky terrain and stands of juniper and pine as they climbed into higher country. When they finally crested a rise and the ranch came into view, Olivia caught her breath. A 2-story house of weathered wood and stone stood proudly in a valley cupped by rugged hills. A barn and several outbuildings clustered nearby, and corrals held horses that raised their heads as the wagon approached. Beyond, cattle grazed on the sparse but sufficient grass, and a creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that shimmered silver green in the breeze. "It's beautiful," Olivia said, meaning it. "It's home," Vincent replied simply, but she could hear the pride in his voice. As they approached the house, a Mexican woman in her 40s emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on an apron. Behind her came a man of similar age, lean and weathered, with a magnificent mustache and kind eyes. "Rosa, Hector," Vincent called as he brought the wagon to a halt. "This is Miss Olivia Burke. She'll be staying with us for a while." Rosa Diaz approached with a warm smile. "Welcome, Miss Burke. We've been preparing your room since Mr. Fletcher told us you might be coming." "Thank you," Olivia said, suddenly shy in the face of such genuine welcome. "I'll show you upstairs," Rosa offered, gesturing toward the house. "You must be tired after your journey." As Hector helped Vincent unload her trunk, Olivia followed Rosa into the house. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, not lavish, but clean and well kept, with simple, sturdy furniture and colorful woven rugs on the plank floors. A fireplace dominated the main room, with a pair of leather armchairs drawn up before it. Mr. Fletcher doesn't have many visitors, Rosa explained as she led Olivia up the stairs. But he's a good man, fair, treats people right. There was a protective note in her voice. How long have you and your husband worked for him? Olivia asked. 5 years now, since he bought this place. Rosa showed her to a corner bedroom with windows on 2 walls that looked out over the valley. We came with the ranch in a way. The previous owner was, she hesitated, not kind. Mr. Fletcher changed everything when he came. The room was simply furnished with a bed, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk, and a rocking chair by the window. A colorful quilt covered the bed, and fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the windowsill. It's lovely, Olivia said, genuine gratitude in her voice. After the cramped, shabby cabin she'd shared with Vernon, this room felt like a palace. Rest, Rosa said. Dinner's at 6. We can talk about your duties tomorrow. Left alone, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the smooth quilt. For the first time since her brother's terrible announcement, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what had happened and what might have happened if not for Vincent Fletcher's unexpected intervention. Tears came then, but they weren't entirely tears of sorrow. Relief mingled with grief, and beneath it all, a tentative hope began to take root. Whatever came next, she had been given the most precious gift: choice. Vincent Fletcher was grooming his stallion, midnight, when Hector approached the barn. The older man leaned against the stall door, arms crossed over his chest. So, Hector said, you want to tell me the real reason you brought that girl here? Vincent continued brushing the horse's gleaming flank. I told you, her brother was about to sell her to cover his gambling debts. And you just happened to be in Jerome Junction when this was happening? Vincent sighed and set down the brush. Flannery sent word, said he had a man who owed him money and was offering his sister his payment. Hector's eyes narrowed. And why would Flannery tell you this? Because he knows I pay well for information about that kind of thing. Vincent met his foreman's gaze directly. I've done it before, Hector. You know that. See, I know. Hector shook his head. 3 times now you've bought people's contracts and set them free. But this is the first time you've brought one home. His expression softened with concern. She's very young, Vincent. She's 18, not a child, Vincent replied, though he understood Hector's concern. And I didn't bring her here for any reason besides giving her a safe place to stay until she decides what she wants. And if she decides she wants you, Vincent shot him a sharp look. That's not going to happen. Hector raised his hands in surrender. If you say so, Patron. I just hope you know what you're doing. He turned to leave, then paused. Rosa likes her, by the way. Says she has good eyes. After Hector left, Vincent leaned his forehead against Midnight's neck, inhaling the familiar scent of horse and leather. He hadn't planned to bring Olivia Burke to Silvercrest. The original intent had been simply to pay off her brother's debt, ensure her freedom, and give her enough money to start somewhere new. But something in her steady gaze, the dignity with which she held herself despite her circumstances, had changed his mind. What am I doing, old friend? He murmured to the horse, who nickered softly in response. Vincent knew all too well what it meant to be at another's mercy. The scars on his back told that story, a story he'd shared with no one except Hector and Rosa, who had seen the evidence when he'd fallen ill with fever 2 winters ago. 10 years of freedom hadn't erased the memory of those 5 years of bondage, working another man's land against his will, his indenture extended again and again on false pretenses. He'd been 20 when he finally escaped, making his way west with nothing but the clothes on his back and a determination never to be controlled again. Through luck, hard work, and a few well-placed investments in silver mines, he'd built a life that was entirely his own. And now, he had brought Olivia Burke into it. Just until she finds her feet, he assured himself, that's all. But as he made his way back to the house for dinner, Vincent couldn't ignore the strange lightness in his chest at the thought of seeing her again, or the danger that feeling represented. The days fell into an easy rhythm at Silvercrest Ranch. Olivia learned the household routine quickly, helping Rosa with cooking and cleaning, tending to the kitchen garden, and occasionally mending shirts and linens. The work was satisfying, far different from the drudgery she had known in Jerome Junction. here. Her efforts were appreciated, her company enjoyed. Vincent was often away from the house during the day, working with Hector and the 3 other ranch hands to manage the cattle and horses that were Silvercrest's lifeblood. But he joined them for breakfast and dinner without fail, and Olivia found herself looking forward to those times more than she cared to admit. Despite his initial reservation, Vincent proved to be an engaging conversationalist, well-read and thoughtful. He asked her opinion on things, listened when she spoke, and never made her feel less for her limited education. In the evenings, he sometimes read aloud from books Dickens, Twain, even Shakespeare, while she and Rosa mended or knitted by the fire. A month passed, then 2. Summer's heat gave way to autumn's crisp mornings. Olivia received her first wages and carefully saved them, though for what purpose she wasn't yet sure. The idea of leaving Silvercrest grew less appealing with each passing day. It was on an October afternoon that everything changed. Olivia was hanging laundry in the yard when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her look up. Vincent was returning early from checking the north pasture, but something was wrong. He was slumped in the saddle, one hand pressed to his side. "Mr. Fletcher?" she called, alarmed. He raised his head, his face alarmingly pale. "Olivia." He started to dismount but stumbled, nearly falling. Olivia dropped the sheet she was holding and ran to him, reaching his side just as his knees buckled. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "Snake," he managed through gritted teeth. "Rattler. Got my side when I was mending fence." Terror seized her. "Rosa!" she screamed toward the house. "Hector, come quickly!" Together, they half-carried Vincent into the house and onto his bed. Rosa cut away his shirt to reveal an angry wound on his ribs, already swollen and discolored. Hector examined it grimly. "The venom is spreading," he said. "We need to draw it out." What followed was a night of desperate measures, poultices, whiskey, prayers. Vincent's fever soared, and he thrashed in delirium while Olivia bathed his face with cool water and murmured reassurances. Sometime near dawn, he grew still, his breathing shallow but steady, and Olivia felt hope return. She must have dozed off in the chair beside his bed, for she woke to find Vincent watching her, his blue eyes clear despite the exhaustion etched on his face. "You stayed," he said, his voice a rasp. "Of course I stayed." Olivia leaned forward, relief making her bold enough to take his hand. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by every steer on this ranch." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "But alive, thanks to you." "It was Rosa who knew what to do for the snake bite," Olivia demurred. "But it was you who found me, who called for help." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Thank you, Olivia." It was the first time he had called her by her given name alone, without the formal Miss Burke. The intimacy of it sent a flutter through her chest. "You should rest more," she said, rising reluctantly. "I'll bring you some broth when you wake." But Vincent didn't release her hand. "Olivia," he said again, something new in his voice. "I thought I might die last night." "But you didn't," she assured him quickly. "No, but it made me think about things I've been avoiding." His eyes held hers. "About you." Olivia's heart seemed to pause. "Mr. Fletcher." "Vincent," he corrected gently. "After last night, I think we're past formalities, don't you?" She nodded, unable to speak. "I've come to care for you, Olivia, more than I should, perhaps." He looked down at their joined hands. "I've tried to keep my distance, to remember why you're here. But the truth is, these past months have been the happiest I've known in a very long time." The confession hung in the air between them, fragile as a soap bubble. Olivia knew her response could burst it or nurture it into something lasting. "I've come to care for you too," she admitted softly. "But I don't want you to feel obligated because you helped me. I'm grateful for everything you've done, but gratitude isn't—" "I know the difference," Vincent interrupted, his gaze intense despite his weakness. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with who you are, your strength, your kindness, your spirit." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes. "I've never met anyone like you. When Vernon sold my contract, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Vincent's smile transformed his face, erasing years of solitude and struggle. "We don't have to decide anything now," he said. "I need to get well first, and you deserve time to be certain of your heart." "I am certain," Olivia whispered. "I've been certain for weeks." His eyes darkened. "Then when I'm on my feet again, we'll talk about what comes next." That talk came sooner than either expected. Vincent recovered quickly, his strong constitution overcoming the venom's effects. Within a week he was up and about, though not yet back to his full duties. On a cool evening, he asked Olivia to walk with him to the creek that ran behind the house. The cottonwoods were losing their leaves, golden discs spiraling down to float on the water's surface. Vincent led her to a fallen log where they could sit side by side, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of amber and rose. "I've been thinking about your future," he began. Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "Have you decided you want me to leave after all?" "What?" Vincent looked genuinely shocked. "No, Olivia, that's the last thing I want." He took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I was thinking about what you might want for yourself. You're young, with your whole life ahead of you. Have you considered what you'd do if you weren't here?" The question caught her off guard. In truth, Olivia had stopped thinking about leaving Silvercrest months ago. "I don't know," she admitted. Before Vernon's debts, I'd thought about becoming a teacher someday. I've always loved books, learning." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "There's a school in Prescott looking for teachers. Rosa saw the notice when she was in town last week." Olivia's heart sank. He was trying to find her another position after all. "I see." "No, you don't," Vincent said gently. He turned to face her fully. "Olivia, I'm trying badly to ask what would make you happy, because I want to give you that, whatever it is. If it's teaching, I'll help you get training. If it's something else, I'll support that too." He took a deep breath. "But selfishly, I hope what would make you happy is staying here, with me." As my wife, the world seemed to stop. "Your wife?" Olivia whispered. Vincent's face was solemn, but his eyes betrayed his vulnerability. "I love you, Olivia Burke. I think I have almost from the beginning, though I fought against it, believing you deserved better than a scarred, solitary rancher with a complicated past." "Scarred?" she echoed, confused. He hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt enough to pull the collar aside, revealing the edge of a ropey scar that disappeared down his back. "I wasn't always free," he said quietly. "I was indentured as a young man to a tobacco farmer in Virginia who believed the lash was the best motivator. When I finally escaped and made my way west, I swore I'd never let anyone else suffer that fate if I could prevent it." Understanding dawned. "That's why you paid Vernon's debt, why you've done it for others before me." He nodded. "But with you it became something more, something I wasn't looking for, but now can't imagine living without." He took both her hands in his. "I don't expect an answer right away. Take all the time you—" Olivia silenced him with a kiss, surprising herself with her boldness. It was brief, just the press of her lips against his, but it conveyed everything her words could not. When she drew back, Vincent looked stunned, then broke into a smile that lit his entire face. "Is that a yes?" "Yes," Olivia said firmly. "Yes, I'll marry you, Vincent Fletcher, not out of gratitude or obligation, but because I love you too." He pulled her close then, his kiss deeper, more certain. Olivia melted into his embrace, feeling for the first time in her life that she was exactly where she belonged. They were married on Christmas Day, 1883, in the parlor at Silvercrest. The local minister rode out from town, and a few neighboring ranchers attended, along with Hector, Rosa, and the ranch hands. Olivia wore a dress of deep blue velvet that Vincent had ordered from Prescott as a surprise, and he wore a new black suit that made his eyes seem even bluer. As they exchanged vows before the fireplace decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, Olivia thought of how differently her life might have turned out if not for the man now promising to love and cherish her all his days. The brother who had sold her had given no sign of life since that day in Jerome Junction, but Olivia had made her peace with that loss. She had found a new family, one built on love and respect rather than blood and obligation. The first year of marriage brought changes to Silvercrest. With Olivia's influence, Vincent expanded the ranch house, adding a proper library filled with books ordered from as far away as San Francisco and Boston. She started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, teaching 3 days a week in a converted outbuilding. Vincent proved to be a devoted husband, tender in private and proud in public. He consulted Olivia on ranch matters, valued her opinions, and never made her feel less than his full partner in life. The scars on his back became familiar to her touch, no longer shameful reminders, but badges of survival that had shaped the man she loved. In the spring of 1885, their son was born, Thomas Vincent Fletcher, named for Olivia's father. With his mother's honey-brown hair and his father's blue eyes, he became the center of their world. Vincent took to fatherhood with surprising ease, spending hours walking the colicky infant around the house at night so Olivia could rest, and later teaching the toddler to ride his first pony. Life wasn't without its hardships. A drought in '86 threatened the herd, and a harsh winter the following year brought heavy losses. Through it all, Vincent and Olivia faced each challenge together, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle overcome. In 1888, they received an unexpected visitor. Vernon Burke arrived at Silvercrest one autumn afternoon, thinner and more ragged than when Olivia had last seen him, but sober, his eyes clear for the first time in years. "I didn't come for money," he said immediately when Vincent confronted him in the yard, hand hovering near his gun. I needed to see my sister, to make things right if I can." Olivia, watching from the porch with 4-year-old Thomas hiding behind her skirts, felt the old wounds throb. But 5 years had dulled their edge, and motherhood had taught her much about forgiveness. "It's all right, Vincent," she called, descending the steps. "I'd like to hear what he has to say." Vernon looked at his sister with something like awe. "You look well, Liv. Happy." "I am." She lifted her chin. "No thanks to you." He flinched but nodded. "I deserve that. I deserve worse." He glanced at Vincent, who still watched him warily. "Your husband had every right to shoot me that day. Sometimes I wish he had." "Why are you here, Vernon?" Olivia asked, neither harsh nor welcoming. "I've been sober 2 years now," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "Working steady in Flagstaff as a carpenter. I've been trying to make something of myself, to be someone you wouldn't be ashamed to call brother." He swallowed hard. "I know I can never undo what I did, but I wanted you to know how sorry I am, how not a day goes by that I don't regret it." Olivia studied him, seeing traces of the brother she'd once adored, the one who had taught her to fish, who had defended her from schoolyard bullies, before grief and whiskey had twisted him into someone unrecognizable. "Who's that, Mama?" Thomas asked, peering around her skirt. Vernon's eyes widened as he noticed the child for the first time. "Is this—" "Your nephew," Olivia confirmed. "Thomas, this is your Uncle Vernon." The introduction was neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but it was a beginning. Vernon stayed for dinner, and then accepted Vincent's grudging offer to spend the night in the bunkhouse before continuing his journey the next day. Before he left, he pressed something into Olivia's hand, a small wooden horse, intricately carved. "For the boy," he said. "I made it myself." It wasn't until Vernon had ridden away that Olivia allowed herself to cry, the tears a release of emotions she'd held at bay for years. Vincent held her. Understanding without words what her brother's visit had meant, the closing of one chapter, perhaps the opening of another. Life continued its flow at Silvercrest. A daughter joined the family in 1890, Eleanor Rose, named for Vincent's mother, and Rosa, who had become like family over the years. Hector and Rosa doted on both children as if they were their own grandchildren, teaching them Spanish and Mexican folk songs along with stories of the old country. Vernon wrote occasionally and visited once a year or so, gradually earning a tentative place in their lives. He never asked for money, and over time, Vincent's wariness gave way to a cautious acceptance. The past couldn't be erased, but it could be put in its proper perspective, a dark chapter that had, against all odds, led to something beautiful. By the turn of the century, Silvercrest had grown into one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. Vincent and Olivia had weathered economic panics, political changes, and the transition from territory to statehood with the same steady partnership that characterized their marriage. Thomas, at 15, was tall and strong like his father, with a natural affinity for ranching and horses. 10-year-old Eleanor showed a sharp intelligence and artistic bent that reminded Vincent of Olivia in her quieter moments. On the 20th anniversary of the day Vincent had brought Olivia to Silvercrest, he surprised her with a grand tour of the East Coast and Europe, something she had only read about in books. They left the ranch in Thomas's capable hands under Hector's watchful guidance and spent 6 months exploring new horizons together. Standing on the deck of the ship returning them to America, Vincent wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, resting his chin on her head as they watched the sunset gild the Atlantic waves. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. Olivia turned in his embrace to face him. At 38, she was still beautiful, the years having added character rather than diminished her appeal. A few strands of silver threaded through her honey-brown hair, and laugh lines framed eyes that had witnessed both sorrow and joy, but chose to remember the latter. "Not one," she answered honestly, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "Every step of my journey led me to you, to our children, to the life we've built. Even the darkest day when Vernon sold me brought me to the brightest dawn." Vincent kissed her then, a kiss that held 2 decades of shared history and promised decades more to come. "When I paid your brother's debt, I thought I was just doing what was right," he murmured against her lips. "I never imagined I was actually saving myself." "Perhaps we saved each other," Olivia suggested. As the ship carried them home to Silvercrest and the family awaiting them there, Olivia Burke Fletcher reflected on the long, unlikely road that had brought her to this moment. From a desperate girl with no choices to a woman who had chosen love, built a family, and created a legacy that would outlast them both. The path had not always been smooth, but it had been theirs to walk together a journey that began with an unexpected act of kindness on a dusty road in Jerome Junction, Arizona, and continued still into a future bright with possibility. When they returned to Silvercrest, they found the ranch thriving under Thomas's stewardship. At 16, he had shown remarkable maturity in their absence, confirming Vincent's belief that their son would one day take over the family business with the same dedication his father had shown. "You've done well," Vincent told him, clapping a proud hand on the young man's shoulder as they surveyed the healthy herd together. Thomas straightened, his chest swelling with pride. "I had good teachers." Eleanor, too, had blossomed in their absence, having taken over her mother's teaching duties with enthusiasm. Under Rose's guidance, she had also developed a talent for healing, using herbs and traditional remedies that combined Rose's Mexican heritage with medical knowledge from books Olivia ordered for her. "She has a gift," Rose had told Olivia one afternoon as they watched Eleanor carefully preparing a poultice for one of the ranch hands who had injured his hand. "People trust her. They feel better just having her near." The observation filled Olivia with quiet pride. Her children were finding their own paths, just as she had been free to find hers, thanks to Vincent's intervention all those years ago. As the years passed, Silvercrest expanded. Vincent and Olivia purchased adjacent land when it became available, diversified into breeding horses as well as cattle, and even planted an orchard that produced apples renowned throughout the region. They built a larger schoolhouse that served children from miles around, with Olivia and eventually Eleanor taking turns as teacher. Thomas married at 22. A strong-willed girl named Catherine from a neighboring ranch. Their wedding, held under the cottonwoods by the creek, echoed Vincent and Olivia's own simple ceremony decades earlier. Within a year, they welcomed their first child, a son they named Hector, after the foreman who had become like a grandfather to Thomas, and who had recently passed away, leaving a hole in the fabric of Silvercrest life that could never quite be filled. Eleanor chose a different path. At 20, she announced her intention to study medicine in San Francisco. Though Vincent worried about his daughter so far from home, Olivia supported her dream wholeheartedly. "We've always taught them to make their own choices," she reminded her husband as they watched Eleanor board the westbound train. "Now we have to trust her to make good ones." And she did. Eleanor returned 4 years later as Dr. Eleanor Fletcher, setting up practice in the growing town near Silvercrest. She never married, dedicating herself instead to healing the sick and delivering babies throughout the county. Her reputation for skill and compassion spread, drawing patients from far and wide. Vernon remained a peripheral but present figure in their lives. As he aged, he mellowed further, the bitterness and resentment that had once defined him gradually replaced by a quiet gratitude for his sister's forgiveness. When arthritis made carpentry work impossible, Vincent offered him a place at Silvercrest not out of obligation, but in recognition of the family bonds that, despite everything, still mattered. "Are you sure?" Olivia had asked when Vincent suggested it. After what he did, Vincent's smile was tinged with the wisdom of years. The man who would sell his sister and the man who sits whittling toys for his great-nephews are not the same person. People change, Olivia. We, of all people, should believe that. So Vernon came to live in a small cabin built especially for him near the main house, where he spent his days carving intricate wooden figures that became treasured heirlooms for generations of Fletchers. The past was not forgotten, but it was finally, truly forgiven. In 1925, as automobiles began to replace horses and the old west of their youth faded into legend, Vincent and Olivia celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary. At 75, Vincent's hair was snow white, his tall frame slightly stooped but still strong. Olivia, at 60, moved more slowly than in her youth, but her eyes remained bright with intelligence and love. Surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, they renewed the vows they had exchanged so long ago. The ceremony was held in the same spot where they had first declared their love by the creek, though the cottonwoods were taller now, and the log where they had sat had long since returned to the earth. "I've loved you through drought and plenty," Vincent said, his voice still deep but softened by age. "Through sorrow and joy, through every season of our lives together, and I will love you through whatever seasons remain to us in this world and beyond." Olivia, her honey-brown hair now silver, squeezed his weathered hands in hers. "You gave me a choice when I had none," she replied, "and every day since I have chosen you, Vincent Fletcher. I will always choose you." That night, after the celebration had ended, and the family dispersed to their various homes on the sprawling ranch property, Vincent and Olivia sat together on the porch swing he had built for her 30th birthday, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. "Did you ever imagine this?" Olivia asked, her head resting on his shoulder as it had countless times before. "All those years ago, when you found me waiting on that trunk outside my brother's cabin." Vincent chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I couldn't see past getting you safely to Silvercrest," he admitted. "I certainly never imagined you'd agree to marry a broken-down cowboy like me." "Not broken," Olivia corrected, patting his knee. "Never that. Wounded, perhaps. But strong where it mattered most." She gazed out at the ranch that had been their home for over 4 decades. "We built something beautiful here, didn't we?" "We did," Vincent agreed, following her gaze to where lights twinkled from the various homes that now dotted the property. Thomas and Catherine's large farmhouse, Eleanor's smaller cottage for the times she wasn't staying in town near her practice, the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, and Vernon's cabin, where a single lamp still burned in the window. More than I ever dreamed possible. They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had shared so much that words were often unnecessary. The night air carried the scent of pine and sage, the distant lowing of cattle, and the gentle rush of the creek the soundtrack of a life well lived. "I have no regrets," Olivia said finally. "Not a single one." Vincent kissed her temple, his lips lingering in a gesture of tenderness that had become as natural as breathing. "Nor do I, my love. Nor do I." They lived 5 more years together, watching Silvercrest transition into a new era under Thomas's capable management, with innovations like telephone lines and electricity gradually finding their way to the ranch. Eleanor's medical practice thrived, and she eventually took on a younger partner, a woman doctor like herself, ensuring that her legacy of healing would continue. In the winter of 1930, Vincent caught a chill that settled in his lungs. Despite Eleanor's best efforts and medicines brought from as far as Phoenix, he slipped away peacefully one snowy evening, Olivia holding his hand as she had countless times throughout their shared life. "Wait for me," she whispered as his breathing slowed. "Not too long, but wait for me." His last smile was for her alone, a promise without words. Olivia lived another 3 years, long enough to welcome 2 more great-grandchildren and to see Silvercrest weather the beginning of the Great Depression with the same resilience the ranch had always shown. On a spring morning in 1933, she asked Thomas to drive her to the creek, to the spot where Vincent had first told her he loved her. There, seated on a new bench the family had placed in memory of Vincent, she closed her eyes for the last time, a well-worn journal in her lap. Inside, written in her neat hand, was the story of a girl whose brother had sold her to cover his debts, and the cowboy who had paid them off and given her a choice, the first of many choices that had led to a life of extraordinary love and purpose. The journal passed to Eleanor, then to her nieces and nephews, and down through generations of Fletchers. The ranch remained in family hands, adapting to changing times while honoring the legacy of the couple who had built it, with love, second chances, and the unshakable belief that everyone deserved the freedom to choose their own path. And so, the story of Vincent and Olivia Fletcher became part of the fabric of Silvercrest itself, whispered in the rustle of cottonwood leaves, echoed in the babble of the creek, and carried on the wind that swept across the land they had loved, a testament to the power of kindness and the enduring strength of a love freely chosen.